Somebody asked in here, I've lost track of it since, but what is Jim Harbaugh's biggest win?
You could say, well, he's pulled one technical upset at Michigan. A few sports books had him a 1-point underdog against Notre Dame, that game in the deluge, when Notre Dame was in the top 10. So that was his one kind of upset. Probably his most impressive win would have been Penn State, 49-10, when they won the 2016 Big Ten championship. Getting the win against a ranked team against Michigan State that year on the road is considered one of his better wins. I would say those 3 wins in a row in 2018, the so-called revenge tour, they beat 3 ranked teams in a row, all of them by double digits: Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Penn State. That's his best stretch as a coach. I think all those teams were, I think Wisconsin and Penn State were like 12th to 15th, and Michigan State was kind of on the tail end of the top 25. The Notre Dame game in 2019 would be amongst his best wins. The Citrus Bowl against Florida would be amongst his best wins. And Penn State in 2016, I would say that's probably on the list of his best wins.
Steve, one day when I get to the pearly gates, when there will be much weightier matters to bother the man upstairs with, I'll be asking things like, did the Packers and Vince Lombardi really fix the heating grid to not work before the 67 Ice Bowl? Did Franco Harris actually catch the Immaculate Reception? And I'll ask, did JT Barrett make it on 4th down? And regardless of that answer, if the officials would have determined and measured that otherwise, what would have happened at Michigan after that?
Well, I'm not really big on that play, because I think if the situation was reversed and it went to a review and it was that close in our stadium, those refs ain't getting out alive, not calling that a first down in either location. The rest of that game, and Mark, you've known me now for several years, okay? Even chatting privately. How many times you ever heard me like blame the refs, we got screwed? You ever hear that crap from me? Never.
No.
The only time I really believe that officials cost us a game was that game in 2016. And it was beyond egregious. I mean, I've got a photo on my computer of the referee smiling at Curtis Samuel as he scores the game-winning touchdown there. And I'm like, I wish my wife would look at me the way that back judge is looking at Curtis Samuel. Mike Weber getting pats on his ass from referees. The fact that we had 8 sacks in that game. Do you remember this? We had 8 sacks in this game. Do you know how many times Ohio State was called for holding, Mark?
Once.
0. No holding calls for 8 sacks. I mean, amazing. It's amazeballs. The whole rest of the game, Ohio State's pass blocking was just perfectly on point, except for the 8 times Michigan actually got home. I mean, that's just, tomato. That game, from an officiating standpoint, I thought was a travesty. And if Michigan had won it, then I think it's 2016 is for Jim Harbaugh what 2017 was for Kirby Smart. Everything, I think, takes off from there. Okay? Similar to, remember when Rich Rodriguez got the Michigan job and the first person he called was Terrell Pryor? Remember that? Okay? If Rich Rod gets Terrell Pryor in here right away to run that offense, what history gets? First of all, what if Rich Rod goes through with taking that Alabama job the year before? Okay, what if Wayne Huizenga had listened to Nick Saban and traded for Drew Brees when he was coaching the Dolphins? These are some things that what if Greg Schiano, who originally said yes to Michigan and then slept on it and then said the next day he couldn't leave Rutgers, he couldn't do it. What if he had said yes? There's a lot of these kinds of what if moments that totally change the trajectory of recent college football history. And and one of them is the West Virginia-Pittsburgh game in 2007. And West Virginia is a 3-touchdown favorite. They just need to beat Pitt, and they're in the BCS National Championship game, and they lose at home to Pitt straight up. And that allows LSU with 2 losses to sneak into the BCS Championship game. If Rich Rod wins that game, Michigan ends up hiring Les Miles that week. And who knows what ends up happening to Rich Rod then. Maybe he never leaves West Virginia since he took him to the national championship game. Those are the little things that could have changed a lot, but there's no question that if Michigan had won that day in Columbus, we would not be having the conversations right now about Jim Harbaugh that we are having.
So when you see things like you saw in 2016 in Columbus concerning the officials, do you think incompetency, or do you think there's something bigger going on here that's nefarious?
You know, if I didn't work full-time in politics, I would probably just chalk it up to incompetency. But I do. So when it's that egregiously bad, and Michigan, by the way, didn't help itself. You know, Michigan had a screenplay in that game, remember, that looked like it was pretty much going to ice the game. And, you know, our most experienced offensive lineman, who ended up starting 50 games, gets called for holding like 30 yards downfield. And it was a good call, okay? So, it wasn't like Michigan played this pristine game. Harbaugh called a terrible play call, having Wilton Spate with half a shoulder throw from the end zone on an obvious passing situation, and it gets picked off. And I think that was Ohio State's only touchdown in regulation, I believe. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it wasn't like Michigan did not contribute to that effort, but that is the one time as a fan that I absolutely believe that the referees screwed us, for sure. What their motivations were, I don't know. I'll let higher powers than me who can gauge such things determine that.
Well, as a Buckeye fan, I didn't see all of the poor officiating that you saw. I just know that Ohio State could not move the ball for 3.5 quarters, and they somehow eked out a drive in the final, half a quarter to.
I mean, it's amazeballs. It's a defensive line y'all couldn't block for 4 hours. That Curtis Samuel was able to run all the way to the right and run all the way to the left. Nobody held. Nobody blocked in the back. Wow. Tip of the cap. Phenomenal.
That's tracking that back and being able to, that's tremendous discipline out
Indeed.
of Urban Meyer's crew.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Forever 7-0 against Michigan. What he'll be against the Tennessee Titans, I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah.
That's somewhat fascinating to see. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody told me that in 5 years Urban Meyer's going to have multiple playoff teams, or that he's going to have a string of 3-13 seasons and he's done and he's out the door. I don't know what to make of that.
You'll get a definitive verdict because he walked into the perfect situation. He drafted the next Andrew Luck, and he had $80 million to spend under the salary cap. So if he can't make this work, and this might be the second weakest division in the NFL next to the NFC North. So if he can't make this work, then he just wasn't going to be an NFL coach.